Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name is Smith, and thanks for tuning back into my channel. Today, we are going to examine Acts chapter 1, verses 9 through 11, and we're going to look at the claim that this verse teaches that Jesus Christ will return visibly and physically and bodily at the end of world history. So without further ado, let's get right into this study here. Here we have, this is what the text says. He was lifted up, and while they were looking on, a cloud received him out of their sight. And as they were gazing intently into the sky while he was going, behold, two men in white clothing stood beside them. They said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking toward heaven? This Jesus who has been taken up from you into heaven will come in just the same way as you have watched him go into heaven." Now, this is the claim that Jesus essentially ascended bodily, which is true, but he will also return in just the same way, which is bodily. That's the argument. That's essentially the argument for the physical, visible, bodily return of Jesus Christ in a nutshell. And in just the same way as the angel says, right? Right? I don't know about that. I read last year, maybe 2 years ago, I read Ken Gentry's book, Have We Missed the Second Coming? It's a decent book. I don't agree with it at all, but, I found it interesting that his main argument was Acts 1, verses 9 through 11, arguing for a physical, visible, bodily return at the end of world history. But what I find very interesting, and I got this from Gary DeMar from his podcast, he has PDF forms, and he's had it for years. He says that Ken Gentry spends over 20 pages of the new coming commentary, The Divorce of Israel, on Revelation 1:7, teaching that Revelation 1:7 does not refer to the physical, visible, bodily return of Jesus Christ, but in fact it refers to AD 70. Which I find very interesting, because if there was a verse to teach the physical, visible, bodily return of Jesus Christ, it would be Revelation 1:7, because this is what it says: "Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and all the tribes of the land," or the earth, "will mourn over him. Yes, and amen." You see, if there was going to be one verse that teaches a physical, bodily return of Jesus Christ, it would be this. It would be this one. And this is interesting. Here you have in Matthew 24:30. "And the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky or in the heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth or land will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory." So in these three texts, Acts 1, verses 9 through 11, Revelation 1:7, and Matthew 24:30, here you have these three tenets: coming of the Son of Man, on the clouds, and the visibility. All three of them have those tenets. Literally, all three of them. Here you have the cloud. They received him out of their sight. And then it says he will come in just the same way. So here you have the coming, the clouds, and the visibility. It's all three there. Same thing here. Revelation 1:7, the coming, the clouds, and the visibility. Same thing here. The coming of the Son of Man, the visibility, we'll see him, and on the clouds, the same thing. All three tenets. So why is it that we maintain Acts 1, verses 9 through 11 does not refer to these texts? You see, if you maintain that Matthew 24, verse 30, and Revelation 1:7 apply to AD 70, you must apply the same standard to Acts 1, verses 9 through 11. You're not escaping it, because here's why. If those three tenets are in Matthew 24:30, if Acts 1, verses 9 through 11, those three tenets, the visibility, the coming, and the clouds, if all three of those tenets are in Matthew 24:30, then you're stuck with this: "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." You see, the time indicators, again, KOs you, knocks you into a corner. You're not getting up from that. Acts 1, verses 9 through 11 refers to AD 70, not a physical bodily return of Jesus Christ, because all three of those tenets are in Revelation 1:7 and Matthew 24:30. And if you apply those to AD 70, yeah, Acts 1, 9 through 11 is AD 70 as well. So this is a one coming. And by the way, that's one coming. Okay? So we must think biblically about this whole scenario about Acts 1 verses 9 through 11. We have to think biblically. What is the focus? What is the focus of Acts 1 verses 9 through 11? Well, I maintain it's this. A cloud received him out of their sight. Let's think biblically. Let's not think like pagans. There you have the disciples looking up, and a cloud received Jesus out of their sight. And the angel says, this Jesus who has been taken up from you into heaven will come in just the same way as you have watched him go into heaven. So a cloud received Jesus out of their sight, and he went into heaven, and the angel says he will come in just the same way. So what should our minds think of when we hear cloud? Should we think of it was just a cloudy day when Jesus ascended? Well, it possibly could have been. But I don't think that's what the Bible is trying to teach us. It's not what God wants us to think. It's not what the Bible teaches. This is what the Bible teaches about the cloud. Now it happened as the sons of Aaron spoke. This is Exodus 16:10. Now it happened as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the sons of Israel, that they turned toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of Yahweh appeared in the cloud. Exodus 19:9. Yahweh said to Moses, behold, I will come to you in a thick cloud, so that the people may hear when I speak with you, and may also believe in you forever. Then Moses told the words of the people to Yahweh. Next one. You have Exodus 34:5. Then Yahweh descended in the cloud there with him, and he called upon the name of Yahweh. Leviticus 16:2, last but not least. And Yahweh said to Moses, tell your brother Aaron that he shall not enter at any time into the holy place inside the veil. That's very important. Behold, before the mercy seat, which is on the ark, so that he will not die, for I will appear in the cloud over the mercy seat. So it's obvious in the Bible that the Bible teaches that the cloud represents what? The presence of Yahweh. So when the angel says in Acts 1 verse 11 that Jesus was received, a cloud received him, what should we think? We should think that he was received into the presence of Yahweh. And we should immediately transfer our minds back to Leviticus 16:2, where did the presence of Yahweh dwell? In the Holy of Holies. Okay? That's where the glory cloud of Yahweh dwelt, in the Holy of Holies behind the veil. Only the high priest can go into the Holy of Holies behind the veil, but once a year to offer the blood of the sacrifices for the people. And you know, that happened every year. The sons of Aaron had to go in behind the veil into the presence of Yahweh where the glory cloud was and sprinkle the blood of the sacrifices on the mercy seat. And if the high priest did not come out of that veil and come out of the tabernacle, the people of Israel were to think that their sins were not atoned for. And in fact, maybe God had struck the high priest dead. Okay? So we should think this about the cloud. Jesus is ascending where? Into the presence of Yahweh as the greater high priest, into the tabernacle that's not made with hands, that is to say, not of this creation. Jesus ascends into the presence, the glory cloud of Yahweh, into the Holy of Holies in heaven. And he does what? He intercedes for his elect. He presents his sacrifice before Yahweh. And just like the high priest in the old covenant was to come out of the tabernacle and appear before the people, so too Hebrews 9:28 says that Jesus will appear ek deutero, out of the second. And if you read Hebrews 9, what is it talking about? Out of the second part of the tabernacle. Okay? Jesus will appear ek deutero, out of the second part of the tabernacle, not for sin, because he already came once for sin. He already made the sacrifice for sin, and he ascended into heaven, into the glory cloud, to present his sacrifice for sin, and he's going to come ek deutero, out of the second part of the tabernacle of the Holy of Holies in heaven for what? For salvation. This is why Jesus says in Luke 21, he says, when you see all these things beginning to take place, talking about the coming of Yahweh, coming of the Lord, the parousia of Jesus Christ, and the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, he says, straighten up your heads and look up, for your, what? Redemption has drawn near. You see, something dramatic was going to happen. Jesus, as the greater high priest, ascended into the presence of Yahweh to offer his sacrifice, and he was to appear ek deutero, out of the second part of the Holy of Holies in heaven, for salvation for his people and judgment on the covenant apostates. That's what our mind should think of. That's thinking biblically. That's thinking biblically. Of course, there's so much juicy stuff there. So much stuff. So this Jesus who has been taken up from you into heaven will come in just the same way. He will come in just the same way. And I maintain this. If Jesus ascended into the glory cloud, into the presence of Yahweh, he will come, what? In the presence of Yahweh. He will come in the glory of Yahweh. And doesn't our Lord Jesus Christ say that? For yes, he does. Matthew 16, 27 through 28. For the Son of Man is going or about to come in the glory of his Father. Catch that. Jesus says he's going to come in the glory of Yahweh. He's going to come in the glory, in the presence as Yahweh, as the Ancient of Days, as the Septuagint says in Daniel 7. He will come in the glory of Yahweh with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his work. Now, when was this coming going to happen? When was this coming in the same manner that Jesus was going to come? When was this coming going to happen? Well, verse 28 tells us, verily I say to you, there are certain of those standing here who shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his reign. Now here you have the visibility, the seeing, the coming on the clouds or in the glory of his Father, the glory of Yahweh. This points us right back to Acts chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. That's so powerful. That's so powerful. We need to grasp that. We need to grasp that because I maintain this coming is not a separate coming in Acts chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. I can assure you the disciples did not think that. They did not think that. They knew that Jesus had said that he would come in the glory of Yahweh in their lifetime. And he also says in this generation. So here's another part, Matthew 26, verse 63 through 64. This is before Caiaphas, the high priest. And the high priest said to him, I put you under the oath of the living God. You tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, you have said it. Nevertheless, I tell you hereafter, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven. You see, the immediate thought of the high priest was to what? Tear his robes. Why? Why? Because the high priest knows his Bible. If Jesus says that he is going to sit, by the way, the high priest couldn't sit. They couldn't sit next to at the mercy seat. They couldn't sit next to Yahweh's presence. They could only offer the sacrifices and leave and come back another year and do it again. But Jesus went and he sat down. He sat down next to the glory cloud, next to the presence of Yahweh. And Jesus says he will come with the clouds of heaven. The Caiaphas knows, the high priest knows that Jesus is saying that he's going to come as Yahweh. That is Jesus' claim to deity. Jesus says, I'm coming as Yahweh. And by the way, another important point before I forget, Jesus ascends into heaven, into the presence of Yahweh, as Hebrews says, after the order of Melchizedek. Genesis 14, Melchizedek was not of the line of Abraham, by the way. He was not a physical descendant. Melchizedek was king of Salem, king of peace. And he was hanging out with the king of Sodom in Genesis 14. And he comes out and he blesses Abraham, and Abraham pays tithes to Melchizedek. And Melchizedek is not of a physical descendant of Abraham, and yet he's what? A priest of the Most High Yahweh. So those who say that it was only for Israel, they're just smoking something, because Melchizedek was obviously a priest of Most High Yahweh, and Jesus ascends into Yahweh's presence, into the glory cloud, after the order of Melchizedek. If that's not something powerful for us to understand, I don't know what is, but that's powerful stuff. Jesus comes into the presence of Yahweh after the order of Melchizedek, and he tells the high priest that he's going to come in the glory of Yahweh. That's a claim to deity. That's a claim to deity. And then in the same manner, this is it. This is the argument here. In the same manner, hon tropon does not necessarily mean in the exact same form. For instance, the argument goes, Jesus ascended bodily, he will return bodily. I maintain that's not the focus of Acts 1, 9 through 11. The focus is obviously on the glory cloud. The focus is obviously ascending into Yahweh's presence and coming back in the glory of Yahweh. That's obviously the focus here. The argument that says that he ascended bodily and he'll come back bodily, I think, is ignoring the context and ignoring the whole focus of this scene, this ascension scene. And you're ignoring what Hebrews says, because obviously he ascended to present his sacrifice. He'll come back for salvation for his people, the old covenant people, and he will bring the new creation, which we are now partakers of. You see, they had to wait for that salvation. That's why Paul says, he says, the night is far spent. The day is at hand. It is already the hour for you to awaken from sleep. For salvation is drawn nearer than when we first believed. They had to wait for it. They had to wait for it. But we now, today, 2,000 years after this, we step into what they had to wait for. We receive it at the moment you are drawn by the Father. So in the same manner does not necessarily mean the exact same form. It does not mean that. So here's Milton Spencer Terry. By the way, he's got my same name for his middle name. Milton Spencer Terry says this, quote, Acts 1:11 is often cited to show that Christ's coming must needs be spectacular in like manner as ye beheld him going into heaven. But one, and the only other three places where what manner, hon tropon, occurs, it points to a general concept rather than the particular form of its actuality. That's very important. Hon tropon points to a general concept rather than the particular form of its actuality. So in like manner, hon tropon in the Greek, does not point to the same exact form. It points to a general concept rather than the particular form of its actuality. Milton goes on. Thus, in Acts 7:28, it is not the sonic particular manner in which Moses killed the Egyptian that is notable, but rather the certain fact of it. So, of course, the Hebrew slave says to Moses, well, you killed me, hon tropon, in the exact same way as you killed, or in the same way as you killed the Egyptian. So, is the Hebrew slave saying, hey, you're going to kill me, bonking me over the head just like you did the Egyptian? No, but he's pointing to the general form. Will you kill me the same way you killed the Egyptian? Moses might use a belt this time. We don't know. So that's the point. It points to a general form, or it's rather the certain fact that Moses killed the Egyptian. Okay? In 2 Timothy 3:8, it is likewise the fact of strenuous opposition rather than the special manner in which Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses. So here you have in 2 Timothy 3:8, Paul says, Timothy, you're going to be withstood against false teachers. And he says, hon tropon, just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses, so too these false teachers will oppose you, Timothy. So is Paul saying to Timothy, get ready, Timothy, man, because, these false teachers are going to come to you, hon tropon, in the same way Jannes and Jambres came to Moses. So if you see these false teachers with staffs, you better get your staff and you better throw down your staff and turn it into a snake to swallow up their staffs. That would be essentially the argument. If you're going to argue that hon tropon means the exact same form in Acts 1, verse 9 through 11, then you must apply that same standard to here in 2 Timothy 3:8. You must apply that same standard when Paul says in the exact same way, Timothy, these false teachers will oppose you just as they did Moses. Just as Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses. And we know Jannes and Jambres opposed Moses by throwing their staffs down and turning into snakes. So will these false teachers throw their staffs down in front of Timothy and turn it into snakes? And is Timothy supposed to throw down his staff and then swallow up their staffs? No. It's the specific, what does he say? It points to a general concept rather than its particular form of its actuality. It's a general concept of it. So that's very important. And in Matthew 23:37 and Luke 13:34, it is the general thought of protection rather than the visible manner of a mother bird that is intended. So here you have in Matthew 23 and Luke 13, Jesus says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her, how often I wanted to gather your children together, just as," or hon tropon, "as a mother hen gathers her chickens under her wings." Now, is Jesus saying, hey, I'm going to come to you, Jerusalem, just like a daggone hen, and I'm going to gather you under my wings like a hen? No, it's the general concept. It's not the actuality. It's not the specific actual. It's not talking that Jesus is going to come as a chicken. Okay, that's what hontropon. It doesn't always mean the exact same form. That's very crucial. And again, if Jesus did not come, this is important, in that generation and immediately after the great tribulation that attended the fall of Jerusalem, his words in Matthew 16:27 through 28 and 24:29 in parallel passages are in the highest degree misleading. To make the one statement of the angel in Acts 1:11 override all these sayings of Jesus on the same subject and control their meaning is a very one-sided method of biblical interpretation. But all the angel's words necessarily mean is that as Jesus has ascended into heaven, so he will come from heaven. And this main thought agrees with the language of Jesus and the prophets. And I couldn't agree anymore. This is exactly what hontropon means. It points to the general concept, not the exact same form. So when the angel says, in the same manner, hontropon, as he went into heaven, so he will come back, does not mean that he went up bodily and he'll come back bodily. That's not what hontropon means. It points out that this ascension into heaven, he will also come from heaven. And I maintain, as Jesus ascended into the glory cloud, into the presence of Yahweh, he will come in the glory cloud as the presence of Yahweh. That's what I'm arguing. That's what in like manner means. That's what the angel is trying to tell them. That's what we are to think when we read Acts 1 verses 9 through 11. Think of the glory cloud in the Old Testament. Think about that. Jesus says he will come in the glory of his Father, in the glory of Yahweh. That's what Acts 1, verse 9 through 11. Again, hope you guys like this video, and if you do, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I know this is a deep study. It's a lot to take in, but just go back and listen to it. I know I kind of had to go fast, but because this is like my third time recording it, keep messing up. But hope you guys like it. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time.